But when information is culled, it causes this huge mushroom cloud of distrust.
Because when I first heard of these riots, to me it was like, oh, I didn't know you felt this way.
The core of the problem, and this is actually a real problem, is you do have a large Muslim population in England of people who genuinely dislike England.
Sure.
They see themselves living there as a necessary evil. They don't feel any allegiance to the country and the culture, and they essentially want to see that destroyed.
But isn't that kind of you?
Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 Khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession.
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
Welcome to another episode of Christ and Caliphate. Today we're going to discuss the riots all throughout England due to an initial, last I heard they haven't named it a terrorist attack, but due to the murder via stabbing of 3 young girls at a dance school by a man born in Wales from Rwandan parents. Now these riots have spread throughout England.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. So in my hometown in Northampton, it's been classically Northampton. So I had a friend messaging me about everything that's going on there, and eventually just turned into absolutely nothing going on there, which is about typical for the town. So basically, where I'm from,
Which is how far from, say, like the epicenter?
the epicenter is. You're going to make me reveal my terrible British geography now.
Well,
but
I mean,
so
it's gotta be better than ours.
Yeah, so the epicenter is in Merseyside, which is Liverpool, which is a sort of northern coastal city,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
So I'm near Northampton, which is the sort of center of the country. So it's actually quite a long way from Liverpool,
Okay.
and it's also away from the center of where the interesting things in England happen.
Okay.
It's not close to London either.
Right. Okay.
So there have been some riots up in Liverpool and other cities and in London. In Northampton, there was a planned protest that people were afraid were going to turn into a riot. No one actually showed up to it, but lots of counter-protesters showed up.
Oh.
So if you look at the footage from the protest in Northampton, and if you looked at the footage of like a typical sort of like night out on the town of people getting drunk in Northampton, the only difference is that people carrying Palestinian flags in the protest.
Let me clarify a couple things. The main protest A is the anti-immigration, anti-Muslim, potentially, racist types. The counter protests have been the ones that are like trying to defend Islam, Muslims, or maybe just, I think it's all kind of umbrellaed, but yes, is that so? Main protest, I think it's been said, far right. Counter protests, it's just been generally labeled as leftist.
Yeah, but the problem with all of this,
All the labels,
is that it's so very more complicated than that.
As it usually is.
So first off, like with the attack itself, misinformation spread really, really quickly, and people just sort of like jumped onto it.
Yeah.
And the idea is that people said this kid was Somali. And basically, Somali is a majority Muslim country. So they put this in the bucket of problems being caused by Muslims in England. And there are some problems that have been caused by Muslim populations in England. That is a thing that has happened. But this kid very likely had absolutely nothing to do with that. And so, but the problem is the press and the police and the government sort of suppressed information about his identity. Probably because they're trying to prevent some racist backlash to the killing.
Exactly what happened.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is the problem. So, and this is something that the police and the media will routinely do in England. In order to try and control the reaction, they'll try and sort of put out minimal details because they're worried about public backlash to this. But as the old Chinese proverb goes, the turtle often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it.
Oh.
And the problem, so the problem with it is when they hide that kind of information, people know what they're doing. Because if you have a white skinhead murder somebody in England, that will be in the headlines very quickly. But if you have an ethnic minority kill someone in England, and this happens in America too,
Sure.
that comes out slower because, like, the sentiment is they want to protect people.
Sure.
And I understand that, but what really needs to happen in a circumstance like this is you need to have somebody come out and say, look, this is who the killer was. This is who he is. Here's his picture. He did this because he's crazy. His family have nothing to do with this. The rest of the Rwandan community has nothing to do with this. So we need public order here. The justice system will make sure that this murderer is punished to the utmost extent of the law. I will make sure he suffers justice for this. But he's violated our values and customs and laws, and he'll be punished for that. Let's make sure that we don't violate our customs and traditions and laws by overreacting to one person's crime.
And the difficult thing with news is that you don't always immediately, like, something happens. People, like, okay, they had in Australia, also, well, mentally ill stabber that went to stab people in the mall. I think, there was all sorts of victims there. And, like, people don't always have answers to any of, like, they can't really, it just happens. And then it's just immediately put out. And then, like, and then people find out motivations later on or not, and then try to paint a more complete picture. But I think that's also the really hard part about these types of things.
My anti-disestablishmentarianist side, I looks at the coverage, right? And the pattern always is, you were saying, if like a skinhead killed somebody, it would be in the news fairly quickly, right? But in cases like this, I tend to find that the media has just kind of like an MO, right? In the way that they operate. And, they're posting pictures of this 17-year-old, but making it look like, posting pictures from when he was 13 years old, right? So everyone has a mugshot. If you're bringing somebody in, there's a mugshot. Everybody knows what you look like. But, and in the United States, they did the same thing with Michael Brown, right? They were posting pictures of Michael Brown, when he was like 13, 14 years old. But, when Michael Brown was shot, I mean, he was like 6'3", 200 and something pounds. He was a big kid. It was also that fellow in Florida who got shot by, it was the whole hoodie thing, right? Mm-hmm. Remember that? So, the problem with misinformation and its ability to spread quickly is because people are trying to suppress the truth for whatever reason, right? So let's just say that the British government has its reasons of not, saying, not like wanting to rush to judgment or whatever. There are a couple things you have to consider. The first thing is due process, right? Like you have to conduct an investigation. You have to bring a person up on charges. The more that you say, the more likely you are to have your, case thrown out because of, tampering, right? Like letting too much information out, spoiling a jury pool, all of those things. I'm not exactly sure how that functions in the UK, but I would say we got our legal system for the most part from the UK with tweaks. So I imagine it's still a thing. And the problem is that, this neutering of information, let's just call it like in its best, it's like a culling of information, right? Like let's just only release what needs to be released. At its worst, it's a neutering of information, right? Like it's taking true information and trying to craft it into a narrative, right? The far left and the far right feed on this. And the problem is that murders happen every day. And they happen by people of all shapes and sizes and colors. Like children get murdered, adults get murdered, minorities murder people, Caucasian people murder people, and it happens all over the world. But because of this like environment where information sits and how it's being disseminated, it causes overcorrection between the two sides, right? So look at what happens in this situation, right? Like, well, if if you're against, if you have a legitimate gripe with how your country handles immigration, right? Or if you have a legitimate gripe with how your country handles crime, right? In a hyper partisan environment, the things that you say are going to get, you pegged as something, right? So if I were to say, the Israeli bombing campaign in the West Coast, right? I'm sorry, in Gaza, is legit, or the flip side of that, it's unjust, right? It's just a murder campaign. Either one of those responses would land me in the eyes of someone else as being far left or far right.
Yes.
When I'm neither, right? Like, I lean right. I'm honest about it. But, the truth is you have to be able to look at the information that's at hand and process it, right? But when information is culled, it causes like this huge mushroom cloud of distrust when these things happen. And it draws the worst elements of society out, right? So the problem we're seeing here, in my eyes, is the problem of overcorrection, right? Yeah. Like the two sides are overcorrecting each other. If we think that there's a problem, we think that he's Somali, we're going to go out and force him, we're going to burn down. So we're gonna loot and we're gonna riot, and then the opposite happens, right? Well, the right didn't even show up. They didn't go home. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, we're not needed here. Now we're gonna do, whatever we're gonna do. And the problem is, how is that portrayed in the media, right? So everything I was reading about the left-wing protesters is that everything is great. A left-wing protester has never done anything wrong, right? Like that's the way that the BBC articles and the stuff I was reading on Twitter and all this other stuff were making it out to be, right. Because, hey, it's only like we're all anti-racist. Well, okay, fine. Most people are anti-racist, right? Like, some people are racist and they're on the left, right? And some people are racist and they're on the right. And they all have their motivations. So anyway, I think in terms of that, looking at what's happening there, it's like heartbreaking to watch a country like eat itself alive.
Yeah.
Particularly culturally or, like governmentally. I was looking forward to going to the UK with you someday.
Hey, there's even more reason to do it now.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I just don't want you
British churches hit us up. This is a problem you're not solving.
Yeah,
Please.
seriously, right?
Well, okay, so 2 questions off of what you just said is like, first of all, were the counter protests truly, which question should I ask first? I guess the first question is actually like, before this explosion of riots and like this explosion of this like bubbling anger towards immigrants, towards Muslims in England, and I don't even want to talk about like Germany yet or like France. It's just interesting it's all happening during the Olympics too, and France is getting a bunch of backlash and like religious aspects there, and suppression of they've been suppressing Islam forever, but like basically like are these let's just bucket, are these right-wing like groups of people, is this like something, would you say that like seeing these riots like, oh wow, I didn't know this is how you felt, or is it like, oh yeah, like if people are paying attention, these sentiments have been public, they've been expressed, they've been, or has it been more like bubbling underneath the surface, suppressed? Because when I first heard of these riots, to me it was like, oh, I didn't know you felt this way. Like that's how my impression. That was what my impression was. And the second question is like, are the left, the counter protests, have they all been like peaceful, or do we even know?
Yeah. So I think actually, in general, most of the protests and most of the counter protests have stayed peaceful, and some have broken out into violence.
Who's doing the violence is my question.
I think it's probably too soon to tell at this stage, but I think there's usually violence on both, because people who are skinheads and people who are Antifa show up to these things because they like to fight each other, and you're going to.
I'm looking at you, Seattle.
Yeah. But to me, this is not surprising. I think there's plenty of voices in British society, like the UK Independence Party, who want more sort of British cultural values and more British sovereignty.
Do they call themselves Christian?
No.
Oh.
There's very few actively Christian political movements in England anymore.
Okay.
Because it really is a pretty not super well represented part of the population at this point. So, I think Nigel Farage, who was the head of UKIP, would say things about Christian values, but wouldn't claim to actually be a believer in any capacity. So you have more people talking about it now than when I lived there, but not people who are Christians. Like even Richard Dawkins, for example, who was the sort of first horseman of the 4 atheist horsemen, as they refer to themselves, is now saying he desires cultural Christianity. If we lose that to Islam in England, then we're losing something of our culture.
Right.
But he's a active atheist who wants no one to believe in God.
No, he prefers he prefers many of the Christian values and believes that there are enough good values that should be adopted at a national level. Versus the Islamic culture or religion.
Yes, and the embarrassing thing for me as an English Christian right now, all the people publicly talking about the need for Christian values in England are non-Christians.
Sure.
So you've got Richard Dawkins, you've got Tom Holland, the historian, not Spider-Man.
Not Spider-Man.
You've got Jordan Peterson's not even British, right? But he is.
No. Yeah.
I think I already said Douglas Murray. But you've got Elon Musk is even talking about this. He talks about Christianity being the immune system of the West.
Okay, it's new information to me.
So there is this
recognition.
There's this recognition, and concern among many people in England
about the larger forces at play.
Yes. Oh. And especially how that plays into immigration.
Okay.
So England has not always done a good job of assimilating ethnic minorities into the country.
I heard I read somewhere it was like historically mainly been a labor recruitment process that has brought minorities into the country.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
But I don't know too much, yeah.
And a lot of places that were sort of territories of the British Empire as well, so like Bangladesh and Pakistan, a big part of that equation. And I think the core of the problem, and this is actually a real problem, is you do have a large Muslim population in England of people who genuinely dislike England.
Sure.
They see themselves living there as a necessary evil. They don't feel any allegiance to the country and the culture, and they essentially want to see that destroyed.
But isn't that kind of you?
Huh?
Isn't that kind of you? We were just talking before this about how you're British, you don't relate to anything British. Soccer, team.
Bro hates soccer.
Bro hates England.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
Soccer, team.
You might be the only English person in the world who I cannot have have a conversation with about soccer.
I had the respect to leave though.
No, I'm joking. He does not want to see England destroyed.
No, I like to be able to visit.
Yeah, right.
I don't live in England, but so there's lots about British culture that I respect and want to see maintained, and lots of what I love about American culture is downstream from British culture. So it's
almost like you couldn't have the second without the first. Kind of what you were just saying.
Right, exactly. You couldn't have America without England in the same way I couldn't have my life in America without my life in England.
Yeah.
Right. Both countries have made me what I am to some extent.
Yeah.
So I still have a desire to see the country of my birth flourish.
Needed to say that.
All right, yeah.
We needed to make that clear. But you were going to say the main problem, though.
Yeah. So,
in your opinion.
So the main problem is that people who believe in multiculturalism don't know how to draw a proper line with multiculturalism.
People who believe in it don't know how to draw a line or like a boundary.
Yeah, like a boundary.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, there are plenty of Bangladeshi and Pakistani immigrants in England.
Yeah.
Who are an asset to the country.
Yeah.
Who are good for the country, who are productive citizens, who love the country.
Yeah.
And should be celebrated by the country.
Yeah.
Right? And the far right fails to differentiate between the people who are bad for the country and the people who are good for the country. The far left fails to differentiate between the people who are bad from the country and the people who are good for the country.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Lenin's idea of a catch-all revolution? Right. So the catch-all revolution that Lenin was looking for against the Bolsheviks were looking for against the Tsar and the ruling class in Russia, were we are going to catch people from every aspect of society, and we're going to forge them into a revolutionary force.
And then later,
but what's that? Yeah, well then you start getting rid of people.
Then you start getting rid of people. Right?
Yeah. So in China, right, the Red Revolution, all of those things. So the effect that this has had across the political spectrum since its inception, right? So since the Bolsheviks has kind of permeated across, right, every system. So it's turned into literally, if you're not with me, you're against me. You know what I'm saying? And in doing that, it's created this hostility, right?
Because power's in the numbers.
Yeah, well,
power's in the numbers. So they're like,
the problem is that
numbers.
if the end game is force, right?
Yeah.
Like if the end game is my ideas are going to be implemented, even if it's by force, you lose this sense of democracy. You lose the sense of discourse. You don't win battles with ideas anymore, with a better idea. You're not building a better mousetrap. You're not building a better idea. You're not coming up with a solution that's better than the other person, right? And being able to articulate the merits for this thing.
People just want to outnumber each other, huh?
I think...
Well, again, and all that comes from like the French Revolution, right?
So I think what's going on in England is more benign than that.
Right, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying it happens in the extremes, though, right? So, you know, why is it that when you look at the discussion that's happening, so we're on the outside, right? Like you're English and you're on the inside, all right? At least you have an inside track, and we're on the outside, right? So we're responding to what we read and what we see. And when I read things, it seems like everything is coming from an extreme, and it's not just there. It's unfortunately the way things are these days. So how do you navigate the extremes in a situation like this? Like, I'm curious, on your take on that.
So the problem with...
Or I'm sorry, or does that even apply here?
Yeah, it does apply, but the roots of the problem go back to the sort of secular materialism that dominates British thinking. So if you have someone in the British government and their mindset is generally there is no God, or there might be, but what you believe about God doesn't actually matter.
Right.
So they think that religion is some sort of fairy tale. So they look at somebody who's a Christian, they think, nice person, they believe in a fairy tale.
And that fairy tale, I prefer how they act in the world.
Yeah, maybe. But I think it's even more simplistic than that. So they think...
That's a very temperamental place to be,
yeah,
too, right?
But they look at a Muslim and they think, oh yeah, nice person believes in a fairy tale. The people who believe in this fairy tale wear this type of hat. The people who believe in that type of fairy tale wear that type of hat. And we're here to... See, I sound more British when I say this. We're here to make sure everybody gets along nicely and pays their taxes so we can all have a nice life together in this country.
Even though you just said, like, a little bit before this, that people do seem to be recognizing that the hats represent a lot more and have actually, well, at least right now it seems like one of the hats has a little bit more power and say, and they're afraid that it has more power. I mean, hence this whole riot.
Yeah, people are starting to
see it.
People are starting to wake up from this, and they're starting to understand that what you believe actually has a tangible difference in the world.
Yeah.
But this is not something people have always been saying. This is something people have been really waking up to for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, politicians don't know how to deal with the left. They don't know how to deal with the far right. They don't know how to deal with Christians. They don't know how to deal with Muslims. Why? Because they don't actually know what it's like to deal with somebody who actually believes something.
I was gonna say
because British politicians believe in nothing.
I was gonna say, like, maybe perhaps it's easier to... Everyone can read a history book, right? And everybody can read up about the history of the UK. But, like, maybe it's easier to because you were saying that worldviews and beliefs have tangible results. And, like, if you read a history about the UK, you can see, like, how the worldviews shaped, like, the nation. And now that isn't as visible, and something else is a little bit more visible.
I mean, that's a good point.
And something else is a little bit more visible, and so when you can't...
I mean, I tend to think that when, like, people just have a way of doing things for a long time, right? That, UK has a long, rich history, right? Goes back a long, long ways.
Yeah, super old.
You know, in life as a whole, you know, things are the way that they are until they're not.
Yes.
And then, you know, you have to take into account that societies change, populations change, attitudes change.
Yeah.
Attitudes towards religion change, attitudes towards politics, values, morals, all those things, they evolve over time, for better or for worse, right? So look at Germany, you know, in the 30s. Looks much different than Germany in like the late 1800s, right? Which looks much different than Germany now. Mm-hmm. You know, the passage of time and history and other influences and mistakes, right? Like all happen.
I wonder what Hitler would say.
Oh, I mean,
about like
Hitler was
Europe now.
I don't know.
He'd probably be saying, he'd probably be trying to say, "Oh, look, I told you so."
Oh.
That's what.
Oh.
No, I can see that.
He would.
Yeah.
He would be saying, "I told you so. This is what I was trying to prevent," and so that's why there are neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
Right.
They're going to see Hitler as some sort of prophetic figure who was trying to stand as this savior to Europe.
Right.
And
which is how he was, you know, positioning himself.
Yeah, that's how he.
He was, yeah.
Yeah, that's how he thought of himself. The problem with Hitler, and the problem with, say, the British nationalists, you know, far right in England right now, is that they, you know, fail to understand that firstly, there's nothing inherently worse about a Pakistani inherently than there is about a British person.
Yeah.
If you took a survey of every sort of stupid, dangerous person in England,
yeah,
at least 75% of them would be white British people.
Yeah.
Like I lived there long enough that I know that the biggest problem with England is English people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is to say, the biggest problem with England is people. And there are some people who are problems who are Pakistani or Indian, and there are some people who are problems who are British.
Yeah.
So this isn't about where someone's from. This is a question about values and ideas. And that's what the far right and far left get wrong. All the far left sees is power and class. All the far right sees is power and ethnicity.
Class?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the far left states, right? Like states that have been overrun by far left governments, always wind up with like an elite kind of ruling class, and then everyone else. You know, you can see it right now in like Venezuela, for instance. Super prosperous country, like socialist government, which goes like to the border of communism, starts wiping everybody out, and now you have like oligarchs, you know, and technocrats that are running the country, and they have disenfranchised the normal person. So, you know, that's class, except the problem is that I think the intentions of the far left in the instance that you're saying is that we're going to liberate all the people, right? Like we're going to empower all the people, but it doesn't land there. You know what I'm saying?
I just got it. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't land there. So,
do you think there's anybody in England who sees the problem and believes that that it would be wise for well, actually, I don't know. I wonder if this is possible, but if there's somebody in England that could actually see what's happening, like have a concrete grasp of like the worldviews at play, and say, I think it's better if we like if we acknowledge or just verbally state like we need to not just go back to Christian values, but like maybe there was something more to this, to Christianity. Like, I wonder if anybody looks at Christianity and can say, like, I think that there could be a solution here. Not that everybody has, not that because I'm not saying, like, okay, I can hear people, like, what they're going to hear with this. I'm not saying, like, go become, like, the Spanish, like the Inquisition and like,
nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah. No.
And aside, I saw
nobody go to this. No, like nobody talk about the Spanish Inquisition and like go try to like you can't because we don't believe in this. But like counting conversions and that is not what I am saying at all. But I am saying that like there are already Christians in England. There's a lot of Christians in England, and it's like, are they vocal? Maybe not. But like they are there, and it's like maybe like, okay, could a better path be forged if these voices were elevated more? Is there room? I think a far leftist would hear this and say it's basically the same reaction that basically the same reaction of like hell no, this is dangerous. This is the same this is like the same problem in a different hat, right? But it's not the same problem in a different hat, and I wonder if anybody in England is able to perceive that.
Can I paraphrase your question?
Please.
Is the result of this situation is it like are believers there being more vocal? Is this something that like will help lead to revival in the UK?
So
probably not. But.
The problem is right now, no is the answer to that question, because I think most public Christian voices there are very sort of soft and timid, and basically just have kind of been convinced of this idea that we just need to be super nice to everybody and polite to everybody, and we'll somehow get ahead that way. So there's lots of sensible people in England who realize that lots of immigrants bring lots of good. Our British cuisine is infinitely better because of all the Bengalis and Pakistanis that live there, and the Turks, right? It's so much better because of that. And there's people from those cultures who are dangerous to British culture and British value.
There's people from cultures that are dangerous.
Here's the contention point, right? Because and you and I were talking about this yesterday, because the influx of people haven't come from places like Canada, right? Or even places where there are lots and lots of, like a stable secular government, right? The influx of people have come from like Muslim countries. So I was listening to Imam Tawhidi, the Imam of Peace, the Australian guy, and he's done a series of interviews lately, and he was talking about how actually it wasn't him, it was somebody else, and he was talking about how what Europe did was they went in search of cheap labor, and they encouraged people to come from different places. But what this imam was saying was they got the worst people. They got all the people who the governments wanted to throw out. So,
he's just saying they didn't get the nice Muslims, the reasonable Muslims.
Well, he did. They got like they sent criminals there, or they sent people who were like, on the outs with their own government, right? Or whatever the reasons were. You weren't like going and saying, let's just say we want to open a Google branch somewhere. You know what I mean? Whatever. That's it's a very technical term, the Google branch. You know what I mean? And in order to do that and do it well, we need people who are well versed in this, and this, right? You're not importing quality labor. You're importing people because they're cheap, and they'll come and whatever. And I think, unfortunately, that happens like everywhere, you know. And the byproduct of that is a desire to not assimilate, you know. The like France, United States, Germany, Great Britain, you know, we have these kind of pluralistic societies that make it easier to integrate. They really do. You know, particularly here in the States, it's understood that you'll have, like, if you came from another place, um, you know, you'll have another background, right? It even goes all the way back to the founding. They were English. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, the to me, right, what's happening is it's the Spider-Man meme. So people are like looking at the situation and going, well, it's Islam, you know. And no, it's not Islam, it's you. You know, no, it's this, right? And everyone winds up pointing at different things and trying to assert blame on it, where really we have like, you know, the reason why we're in this current situation is because somebody's mentally ill, probably. Right. You know what I mean? Like somebody's mentally ill, and not getting treated, you know? And again, I'm not like making like, I'm an immigrant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you're an immigrant. You're an immigrant, you know? And I'm not saying we're the good immigrants and they're the bad immigrants.
No.
I'm saying that in a situation where you're not like kind of going in with a greater plan, you know, of who you're going to let into your country and why they're going to be there and like how you're going to integrate them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it turns into, well, you know, we brought you here and now do your own thing. Oh, and by the way, we're English. Like, and there are like, you know, in any society, like it takes generations to integrate.
Because like a lot of the attacks and the riots have been towards mosques, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like super messed up. And it's like, you know, I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. Look, but I'm just thinking.
I remember New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania before 9/11, and there are, you know, hordes of peaceful Muslims that, you know, live there and have lived there. But there were mosques that were teaching jihadist like teachings to people, and they were listening to them and they were acting on them.
Dude, England,
right?
Yeah.
So, and these things happen in all of these places. So to me, the issue isn't like, you know, the government needs to be more big brother. The issue is how do we as like a society take people in and integrate them and also have boundaries, right? Like how do we say like, you know, you're welcome to stay here.
Yeah.
But there are requirements of staying.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like a path to citizenship, or, you know, if you're here for, we're talking about how hard it is for certain ethnic groups to get residency established in a place like Dubai, right? And how hard it is to just kind of find a home away from home, you know. Some places make it really difficult to integrate. And I think some places do it more thoughtfully or less thoughtfully than others. So, yeah.
Like, because what I appreciate about like the Christian worldview, like, again, not like Catholic, but like what I appreciate about like the Christian worldview is that I think there's room for like, there's room for a lot of tolerance. Like there's room for people to express themselves, and how for them to have freedom of religion, freedom of expression, without like, whereas opposed to like what's happening right now, you were saying secular materialism is like wanting to suppress people. And like, I think that like what I appreciate about a Christian worldview is that they're like a biblical Christian worldview is that there is room for a lot of freedom and there's boundaries and there's like some very good like reasonable boundaries, like very reasonable boundaries. And I'm not saying that like, oh, all the policymakers, they just need to be Christian. Like that's not what I'm saying. But it would be good for people to think a little bit more deeply about like what these worldviews truly offer, what each one is truly offering, and like where is there more, like where is there actually a better solution? Not a perfect, because there's never going, people are, as we started this episode saying, like people are always going to be killing each other. Like that's never going to be solved. But like I think that the trajectory that it's being, that, like, for example, that a place like England could be headed towards could be better. It could be a better for people and for, like, you know, it could be better.
So we need to land this because I need to make dinner soon. But
what are you having?
Chicken Alfredo. Now, what we essentially, there's a few things that I think people need to understand. The left-leaning people need to understand that these protests, while they may be sort of wrong-headed in a lot of ways and triggered by misinformation, there's genuine problems that do exist because of the way immigration has been handled in England.
And because people are evil.
Yes.
People are always going to be doing evil things because they're not inherently good.
Yes.
They need to learn to be good
and make
decisions.
So there are problems that are caused by this in England, and acting like people who have concerns are all just racist or crazy does not help solve those problems. No. Under the same token, anybody who's protesting outside ethnic communities or by asylum seekers, they're only making the problem worse at that point. What you need is an ability.
You mean the people that are like attacking mosques and hotels?
They're only making it worse. All it's going to do is polarize society more.
Right.
What you need is for people with Christian values, British values, to be able to push back against the worst elements of that society, to have an open hand of friendship to people in general, and act as welcoming neighbors, make friends with people from other cultures, personally welcome people, personally make friends and be invested in people's lives.
Integrate.
Yeah, integrate.
But not integrate like from like the academic textbook definition of integration, which is just like forcing somebody to look and say certain things. That's not what we mean. You've got to
go, meet your neighbors and
like, for who they are.
Yeah, for who they are, and be, welcoming.
Even if you disagree.
Yeah, and when you disagree, speak honestly about that. And when people come out and what's really needed here is when that happens, when those disagreements are voiced, there are voices that are going to come out and say, you can't say that, that's racist and prejudice against the culture. And somebody needs to calmly say, hey, media talking heads, I'm sure you mean well, but you're wrong, and your ideas are bad and they're going to make our lives worse. So please stop talking. Let me have a conversation with my friends.
Yeah.
And so Christians can't take over the government of England anytime soon, right? They're not going to have any influence in the government. But what Christians can do is be that kind of voice, a voice which is courageous, forthright, while also actively engaging people. Because as Christians, we understand that people matter immensely and ideas matter immensely too. And we can go forward in the world while caring about both those things.
And that no person is better than anybody else. It just looks different.
Right.
It just sounds a little different, but what you're hearing is like the same thing that you are. Those things that you don't like.
Right.
They live inside everybody.
No person is better than another, but some ideas are much better than other ideas.
Right.
Well, guys, thank you for listening. England, try not to burn yourself down. And we'll see you next week on Christ and Caliphate.